It should be recognized that the lives of people are subject to objective laws, which can be grouped into 6 groups. Biosphere-wide, regulating 1. The interaction of the biosphere and the cosmos, 2. The formation of biocenoses, and 3. The interaction of biological species with each other. Species-specific. Biological, anatomical, physiological, and psychological objective laws regulating the life of humanity as a biological species. Religious noospheric. Nravius ethical in their essence, objective laws regulating the interrelationship between the carriers of reason and will. And contrary to the opinion of many, the objective laws of this category go beyond the boundaries of human society, and ethics dictated from hierarchically higher levels in the organization of various kinds of systems existing within the almightiness of God is obligatory for hierarchically lower levels, and deviation from its norms is punishable. That is to say that V.I. Vernadsky, P.T. de Chardin, the saints of all confessions did not rave, but interacted with one of the aspects of objective reality. It is those who deny the noosphere and the almightiness of God as really acting factors of being who rave. Culture is an information algorithmic system, and it is variable, both in terms of objectives and in ways of achieving them, due to which there are socio-cultural objective laws, following which guarantees the stability and development of society in the continuity of generations, and their violation can lead to its disappearance over the course of the life of several generations under the impact of degradational processes. Therefore, culture in politics should be considered in 2 ways interconnectedly: as an instrument of governance towards society and a means of its self-governance, as an object of programming for the objective of ensuring in the future the desired self-governance of society and governance towards it. Financial economic objective laws that predetermine both the development of socio-economic formations and their degradation and collapse. Objective laws of governance, the same for all processes of governance, whether it be a child riding a tricycle under the supervision of adults, or a complex project implemented by several states on the principles of public-private partnership. The principle of jurisprudence and law enforcement practice. Ignorance of the laws excuses not, i.e., does not absolve from responsibility. This also covers the impact of the objective laws of all 6 above-named groups on people personally, on culturally unique societies. To deny the existence and operation of objective laws is idiocy. Not knowing them is ignorance, dangerous for others and descendants, all the more if the representatives of power are ignorant and impotent of mind. Therefore, it is necessary to know the objective laws and to see their manifestations in life, in order to be able to rely on them in politics, in work, in service, in family and personal life. Culture is all information and algorithmics, knowledge and skills that are passed from generation to generation in a ready-to-use form, in addition to the genetic mechanism of a biological species, behavioral programs of an instinctive character, and an unconditioned reflexive character are transmitted on the basis of the genetic mechanism of a biological species. The governorially consistent typology of cultures and subcultures is based on 3 characteristic attributes which culturologists of the scientific officialdom do not see at close range. These characteristic attributes are summarized in this table: Typology of cultures and subcultures. The column variance of this table contains the ideal that must be realized by humanity, that is, by all peoples. All other variants are in one way or another vicious, and create problems for society, up to those which are suicidal. Attitude towards cognitive creative potential of a person. The variance of this attitude: indifferent, to suppress cognitive creative potential in each and every one, to suppress cognitive creative potential in the majority, but in this or that measure to realize it in this or that minority, to provide and support the development of cognitive creative potential in each and every one. The creative potential of each and every one is people-wide property. The next characteristic attribute is the attitude towards sophist and shame. Sophist and shame are two faces of the innate religious sense, the divine principle, thanks to which a person is able to distinguish between dobro and evil in their concretics at the pace of the development of the situation, regardless of his education, and sometimes despite the prejudices introduced into his psyche by the education system. Sophist, in relation to the development of a situation, acts proactively. Shame works after a person has ignored the voice of sophist. The variance of attitudes towards this characteristic attribute: to suppress sophist and shame in each and every one must be simply law-abiding automatons. Each and every one must carry sophist and shame throughout the course of their life. An individual without sophist and shame is a humanoid, but not a human. The next characteristic attribute is the attitude towards willpower, as well as towards the capability of a person to subordinate himself and the stream of events around him to the purpose-orientedness which is realized by him. The variance of attitude: to suppress willpower in each and every one, to suppress willpower in the majority, and to build a hierarchy of right to willpower, as the right of some to subordinate to themselves the willpower of others on these or those principles in accordance with the hierarchy of generalized means of governance, weaponry. Willpower must be developed in each and every one, and in each and every one it must be subordinated to the dictatorship of their sophist, and must realize their creative potential. This is a human in the entireness of dignity. If an individual does not have at least one of the three named qualities on which the typology of cultures is built, creative potential is not mastered or is blocked, sophist and shame are suppressed or driven out of psychic activity, willpower is suppressed or rented out. If throughout adult life, or in some of its periods in the line of duty including, then in principle he does not possess the dignity of a human, or he loses it for some periods of time, and finds himself within the boundaries of God's allowance for others to abuse their capabilities in relation to him. This applies not only to people personally, including the most highly respected, but also to social groups and culturally distinctive societies, which are characterized by the statistics of distribution of individuals between variants of realization of each of the three named characteristic attributes within a particular society, social group. An example of the renting out of will within a culture can be seen in consideration of the Nuremberg trials. In Nuremberg, by the Nuremberg International Tribunal, all loyal Nazis were convicted precisely for this, for the sophist-less performance of their official duties, for the surrendering of their willpower and creative potential on lease to the Führer, his masters and puppeteers. It is also useful to ponder on why Hitler was not indicted by the Nuremberg Tribunal, either in absentia or posthumously, especially since it was not the corpse of Hitler that was identified, but trousers and boots, in which the corpse of an individual similar to Hitler was dressed. It should be understood that Homo sapiens is comprised of two principles, which can be called the animal principle and the divine principle. In the aspect of his animal principle, he is a herd-pack monkey, and accordingly, being a biologically weakly armed species, Homo sapiens also carries a very weak innate morality reaching permissiveness, typical of all herd-pack monkeys, as well as the remainder of the complex of instinctive programs oriented on reproduction in the continuity of generations of the herd pack, extremely effective in the sense of stability in relation to the pressure of the environment. However, he must realize the divine principle in himself. Otherwise, cultures the carriers of which avoid this will self-destroy. The mechanism of self-destruction of stably non-human cultures and their carriers is simple. The innate morality of the monkey is organic for the monkey of the Homo sapiens species in the wild at a level of development of culture which is close to zero. But if it persists under the conditions of the development of civilization along the technospheric or magic path, then the monkey of the Homo sapiens species ceases to be a weakly armed biological species. The power of the technosphere, including weaponry in this case, as a consequence of the absence of the dictatorship of sovest and shame, to which the personal willpower should normally be subordinated, is used by representatives of this species carelessly and irresponsibly in intraspecific competition in accordance with the norms of the innate morality of the monkey, and upon reaching a certain critical gap between the morality and the power of the objects of the technosphere, weaponry and magics, inevitably destroys the carriers of the innate morality of the monkeys who did not take advantage of the opportunity open to them from above to become human. Additionally, civilization, in particular medicine in its historical form in the civilization of the West, removes people from the law of natural selection, as a result of which, if society does not become a society of humans, then processes of biological degeneration begin to dominate within it, followed by cultural degradation, since new, biologically weaker generations are incapable of further developing the culture inherited from their ancestors and are not even able to master it. An epidemic of psychic underdevelopment and mental illnesses. An epidemic of loss of reproductive health, and as a consequence, an epidemic of infertility. General decline in medical biological indicators, which opens the way for some other epidemics. And the current global civilization has not only approached this line of self-destruction, but even raised its foot to cross it. We must stop and change the direction of our development. If the mechanisms of natural selection characteristic of the fauna cease to operate in civilization, then only that beyond worldly love, about which Jesus Christ spoke, can protect people from biological degeneration and cultural degradation in the continuity of generations, leading civilization to extinction. And incarnation is given to the soul, not in order to grab as much as possible and sample all sensory psychological pleasures, but in order that the individual become a human, having learned to love. Therefore, an egression from the collapse of civilization and its bright future are possible only as a product of the personal development of people and upbringing by them of their children and grandchildren, their friends, so that everyone, in pre-adolescence, that is, by the beginning of adolescence, becomes human in the sense defined in the table Typology of Cultures and Subcultures. For this it is necessary to work, to study life as such, to read thick books of different directions of socially significant ideology, to think, rather than watch television and videos on the internet in which talking heads, not always competent and intelligent, many of whom are either politically, ideologically, financially or otherwise motivated, or are objects of manipulation, broadcast about what is happening, what is significant and what is not, what is dobro and what is evil, who is a great and wise leader, and who is a tyrant usurper. In the meantime, without distinction of their position in the social hierarchy of personalities, generated and reproduced on the basis of the innate morality of herd-pack monkeys, all people are really hostages of the system-forming principles of the civilization of the West, the world community, expressing the animal principle of the biological species Homo sapiens. And one of the aspects of that beyond worldly love is patriotism. And today this patriotism is not within the limits of one's wallet and the walls of one's home, but patriotism of a global scale of action. If one correlates with the entire function of governance in relation to a culturally unique society, then patriotism is a combination of three qualities carried by a person. Certain ideals that form a dream about the future, bright, previous from the point of view of the Nraviya standards of the individual, which correlates to the first to third stages of the entire function of governance in relation to the state as a biosphere socio-economic system. 1. Identification of the environmental factor which pressures the psyche, which causes the subjective need for governance. 2. The formation of the skill stereotype of discerning the environmental factor for the future and its dissemination in the culture of society. 3. Setting of objectives in relation to the discerned factor. The second quality of patriotism is knowledge and skills necessary to make this dream come true and make ideals a reality. For the most part, they belong to the fourth to seventh stages of the entire function of governance, although something may belong to the previous stages. 4. Formation of the general conception of governance and particular conceptions of governance in relation to each of the objectives comprising the vector of objectives. 5. Implementation of the general conception of governance in life. The organization of new or the reorganization of existing structures of governance that carry the objective functions of governance. 6. Control, observation, over the activity of structures in the process of governance. 7. Improvement of the current conception if necessary. The third quality of patriotism is selfless willingness to lay down one's own life in order for these ideals to come true. If something of these three components is absent, then there is no patriotism, although demagogy on patriotic themes can be very histrionic and sincere. According to this view, in any country of the world, there are only a tiny fraction of a % of capable patriots, and there are a few more who want to become patriots and work for it. However, at the same time, there are many false patriots and pseudo-patriots who are ready to drown the motherland and the planet in a storm of emotions, both in constant strikes and in the enmity of so-called true champions of certain ideas against the so-called enemies of these ideas, both in real life and in the cyberspace of the Internet. But such storms of emotions are always destructive in relation to the constantly flowing present and bright future of both the motherland and humanity as a whole. Even in the presence of these three components, however, patriotism can be inconsistent to life if there is no place for certain ideals, desires, in the providence of God, or if they contradict the objective laws of all six groups to which the life of people is subordinated. An example of this is the patriotism of the White Guards, the patriotism of convinced Hitlerites. And besides, life flows, society changes, development is of a phase-by-phase character, and therefore each epoch possesses its own ideals, knowledge and skills necessary to translate these ideals into life, and its own problems that did not exist in the past. Therefore, there can be neither abstract patriotism, that is, patriotism not filled with the dream of the future, and the knowledge and skills necessary to realize this dream, nor emotionally meaningless patriotism, nor the standard of ideology of patriotism established once and forever. And therefore patriotism cannot be a national idea. But it is necessary as a means of incarnation of a national idea, ideals of a certain historical stage in the development of society in line with God's providence, into life. Therefore, in all crowd elite societies, there is a policy of replacing true patriotism which works for the development of the country and humanity, with loyalty. Loyalty implies rejection of the dictatorship of Sovest, and therefore loyalty is a kind of betrayal of the motherland and treason towards God. The successful cult of loyalty is the main internal reason for the collapse of the Russian Empire. And trustworthiness, about which M.E. Saltykov-Shchedrin said the following: "Trustworthiness is a brand for the acquisition of which it is necessary to commit some nefarious act, bearing in mind that cattle and slaves are branded. Working for the reproduction of various kinds of unpraviousness in the continuity of generations, for which it is necessary to extinguish social development by encouraging degradation. patriotism and loyalty are different phenomena, within crowd elite cultures for the most part antagonistic to one another. If patriotism wins, then society develops, the state becomes stronger, gaining the support of its citizens. If loyalty wins, then society degrades, and the state falls into a crisis or perishes in a collapse generated by the politics of its elite. But defending loyalty from patriotism and instilling loyalty in society is the style of the work of any elite corporate government and its so-called competent bodies. Since this is typical of all states, this is work on the self-destruction of global civilization under the influence of the root threat to its life. The innate monkey morality of the biological species Homo sapiens in all its everyday manifestations, with all the scales of these manifestations, from personal to global civilizational.